Let's talk about taxes and tax planning. There was no income tax until 1913, where an amendment was passed to create an income tax, and they started taxing people on the income they earn from whatever source unless specifically excluded by law. And then it was in 1916 we created a whole additional tax system called the estate tax system, and the two shall never cross. They're totally independent of one another. The agreement was for those people with larger estates, they would pay tax before it's transferred to the next generation, and in exchange, the heirs would not have to pay capital gains on the assets they received. They could sell those assets with a step up in basis. The basis of most estate planning that's done today, it seems to focus on avoiding estate tax. Yet the tax laws have changed so much that it's almost irrelevant. You'll see the levels of where we're at today as we progress through here. Few families have a taxable estate. So the idea of tax planning for an inheritance is kind of just forgotten. But things have changed. We went from the 10s, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s without any real retirement plans other than the pension a person got at work. So when you went to work, you worked, you got a pension when you retired, you didn't really have any part of it, and none of that went on to your children. Well, then when the 70s came along, they started the IRAs and ERISA and various pension plans. That started the idea of tax-deferred savings. Maybe some of you in this room started an IRA way back in the 70s. And then it wasn't until the 80s that the 401k came along. In the 80s, the 401k started with very, very low participation because the employers were liable for every decision you made in your plan. And it wasn't until 1990, it happened to be the year I got into this business, I discovered that a tax law had passed, and that act provided relief for the employers from that liability of the decisions employee makes, so long as they provided the employees with education regarding finances. So I got my start in the business, going to corporations, convincing them to hire me to talk about finance matters to the employees of their corporations. Well, once we hit the 90s, the 401ks exploded, and the participation rate went through the roof. People poured thousands or tens of thousands of dollars a year into these plans, and here we are, the 90s, the 2000 and 2010s. We are now at a point where massive amounts of wealth have been accumulated in retirement plans, yet we still do estate planning the way we've always done estate planning. There is very little consideration to the impact our heirs will experience for inheriting those assets. As we go through time, and as that front edge of people retire and pass away, more and more and more assets will be transferred to our heirs from these types of plans, and the transfer requires income tax planning, not estate tax planning for most families in America.